Hello, I'm Bryson LaFleur with the Tennis Journal podcast. The following is a conversation with movement practitioner and athletic trainer Hayden Mitchell. In this discussion, we explore how everything in life can be training. Pushing beyond traditional boundaries, we dive into the power of neural movement, creativity, and the importance of unstructured play in athletic performance. Hayden challenges the idea of putting athletes in a box, advocating for a broader approach that includes learning from disciplines like gymnastics, embracing repetition without repetition, and focusing on movement quality. It's all about unlocking strength, mobility, and mental agility through exploration. Let's dive in. Many athletes like Novak Djokovic emphasize the importance of mental and physical harmony in their training. For example, Novak visits a temple just outside of London during Wimbledon for his meditation practice. What is your view on the role of mindfulness, focus, and meditation in athletic training? And how do you think practices like these can contribute to a tennis player's performance?
I think they're one of the most vital possible things you can do. I think we could just even think about it from one perspective is, do they have a therapist that they align with? Not
Hmm.
even a sports psychologist. It was somebody to help them with other decisions in life. And a lot of people, no matter how wealthy or successful they are, struggle for communication with self and communication with their partner, their friends, their family, you know? And it is finding that alignment with their emotional and psychological safety, you know? And we see athletes at the top level struggle with, you know, depression, deep sadness, anger, right? And it's learning to roll with those emotions, work with those emotions, and see them through. It's just like when I give somebody kind of like a prompt as far as movement goes, and they say, I want the barbell on your back, and I want you to move in a position until it feels right to move into the next position and just flow. Well, I don't know how to create. That's okay. That's okay. The more you do this, the better you're going to be. Same thing with an athlete's psychology, right? The more exposures they have to like working through difficult emotions, the better it's going to be. That's the beautiful part about meditation. Whether, you know, there's various forms of meditation, is to, okay, I see this thought. Is it useful? Okay, I can sit with this thought or push it away. Let's move on to something that's more useful for me. Or just to be able to label, well, that feels like anger. That feels like sadness. I don't run from that. I try to learn from that. And that's why I think my observations have been with the people I admire the most that are not just successful on the court, on the field, or on the battlefield. It's they have a ritual of a journal, a noticing of a written record of their thoughts, to be able to push that out, not in the ether, not just the thought, that it's here on paper, something they can refer back to or never do again, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't say enough things about trying to have, there's no such thing as balance in life. It's always visiting extremes, right? As an athlete, it's like extreme level of competitiveness. Let's hope, right? You want to friggin' win, obviously. And then it's finding yourself at the opposite end of that. It's kind of maybe stillness, calm, eliminating that competitive spirit, being present with self, with others.
How do you think, how an athlete might be able to hone that in? Because, for instance, I think if you're an athlete or you're a high performer, it's sort of like you do need to kind of be at that extreme level of competitiveness and desire to win. However, a lot of things come from, that mental stillness. So I'm just saying, could you give any advice or insights about how to balance those two parts of yourself or an athlete?
I can give you a very concrete, practical example. You should do Yoga Nidra before your, like maybe even just 10 minutes prior to training, and practice it. Practice it in training before you did it in like an event. whether it was a game, match, whatever, to practice something like a Yoga Nidra or another type of meditation. The reason why I prefer Yoga Nidra from other types of meditations is it's very easily accessible. And as long as you set a timer to where it would wake you up if you fell asleep, because sometimes they fall asleep, like it's massively beneficial for stress management. I, as a guy who likes to be relatively violent as far as my actions in performance training, right? I prefer to be centered prior to a lift or a jump or a sporting action of any kind. Yoga Nidra helps me drop into that. I find resonance breathing can be very helpful. Post match, post training, I like to use this idea of a rolling breath, right? Where it may be 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out, 3 seconds in, 6 seconds out, usually with the legs elevated, just to find yourself back centered where your body's able to drop back into a parasympathetic state of recovery. It's hard to perform when you're stressed out. It's pretty damn difficult, if not sometimes impossible, right? It's where we get that freeze. Too much tension is not a good thing. Anxiety can help drive performance. And I think that's part of the issue is people are like, I'm too anxious. Let's not look at it like that. Sometimes anxiety can make you do amazing things.
Um, and so like you talked about like a little bit about how a part of it is sort of neural movement, meaning so for instance like some athletes just have a good perception of space. They know kind of when it's crucial to perform. They know the right shot to make or the right decision to make in that moment. Is there any way that you can use or integrate fitness to develop things like that?
Yeah, I think that's where the play comes in, right? Like you want people, I talked about like that warm up, like maybe there's a group or, maybe you find the right kind of movement strategy as a warm up for an individual that you're working with where they're in flow, you know. One of the greatest movement teachers in the world that most people admire is a man named Ido Portal, born in Israel, capoeira practitioner initially, and then went throughout the world to discover all sorts of different movement practices related to the martial arts and dance, and worked with Conor McGregor. And it may sometimes just be, I remember Steve Nash, and he would like juggle the ball like it was a soccer ball, right? It may be instead of hitting that tennis ball with the racket, it's finding y'all usually have some type of like wall you're hitting against. It's like punching that tennis ball, right? It's just kind of finding them in flow, you know. A lot of times it needs to kind of feel like rhythmic and loose and dancey. One of my favorite practitioners, his name's Patrick Koo at Thoughtful Meathead on Instagram. He's of Asian descent, and he talks about Asian kind of grandmother like stuff. So he's swinging all these different kind of loose rhythmic actions to kind of feel like in your body the connective tissue loves to shake it out, right? Sometimes it may be adopting some gymnastics style things where, we're asking people to do minimal amount of tumbling or hopping on those gymnastics rings, maybe doing a slight bit of like parkour, finding different like obstacles to explore, right? If
Hmm.
you have other athletes with you and it's not an individual session, making everything a competitive game is always going to be a beautiful thing, you
Hmm.
know. Because again, like it's just a matter. Rob Gray's done great work within this, wrote a book called How We Move, and it really is just a matter of perception and action, you know.
Hmm.
And really like your perception is contingent upon not only like your cognitive abilities, your ability to read the game, right? But it's also like you're reliant upon your physical abilities. Can I actually do that?
Hmm.
And that's where the sports performance and the sport coach come together to navigate. Okay, how can we get them to be even more of what they already are from a performance perspective?
Hmm.
You know, does that mean specific patterns? Does that mean more gameplay, getting them out of their head? Again, with anything that's neural, it has to be, I kind of think of it as like, this is where we're playing with the bodies, kind of like spring-like effect, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like kind of moving in and out of space with like real kind of looseness, a relaxation. This is where, I think one of my former students at the University of Alabama, she's now a women's basketball coach, and we would talk about like just the quality of grace.
Yes.
What does grace look like? And you know it when you see it, right? And you see it so much in the sport of tennis, where it's that finesse. But these people are also so powerful. So they
Hmm.
get to this spot and they're so quick and they're so violent in their actions, and then they suddenly just drop it down just that perfect, right? And to be able to find that is obviously going to happen in practice on the tennis court, but it's also making sure that as long as they're willing, that there is a little bit of that dance and that vibe, and to let them feel the music. Sometimes it is just letting the damn athlete dance, man. From where I'm from and where you're from,
Yes.
one of the best things you can do for your athletes before a game is to turn up the music, boy. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Right? When you're from the deep South, and like, I had African American inner city youth, and then I had African refugees coming from various countries in Africa. I mean, you talk about dance culture, man.
Hmm.
And so it's
Yes.
kind of finding that. So that's sometimes the quality as far as like that neural stuff. But like I'd referred to before we kind of got cut off was, I refer to my friend at the Thoughtful Meathead, Patrick Koo on Instagram. He talks about Asian grandma patterns.
Uh-huh.
And so some of that may mean kind of like if you're if you're thinking about maybe like qigong or tai chi, but then kind of swinging out of that. And then with the neural qualities, we talk about that perception and action, right? And again, referring to Rob Gray, the book How We Move. There's so much research related to constraints-led approach, motor skill acquisition. But that athlete needs to be able to perceive they have that tactical genius, that quality of they read the game so well, they're a PhD in their sport, and do they have that physical capacity to make that pass, right? To hit that shot, you know? And if they don't, and we observe that as a sports coach, like you as the tennis coach meets with the sports performance coach, we're like, well, he's kind of missing something. If he could do this at this angle, right? If he could have confidence here, or she could have confidence here, what could we do to draw that out? Is it a drill? Is it a particular movement pattern? Is it an assortment of movement patterns? You know, so many different ways to exploit that. But I always think of the neural side of things as, the beautiful part of what we get to do is to not think of our athletes as a data point or a template. It's all of the other things that go into, training, just drawing out their personality in a sense, right? To let them become all of them, to have confidence in being every bit of who they are, full expression, right? Not fearful of failing, just going for it. In a
Hmm.
soccer setting, Bryce, that may mean we would play like small sided games, and we would just tell the kids, like, do the craziest thing you've ever thought to do. Whatever
Hmm.
the move is that you've been thinking to do, you got to do that for the next 3 minutes. Pop, pop, pop. And then we'll give them a little bit of rest. It's like, well, what else could you discover, right? What else could you
Hmm.
play with? Have you tried this combination with your teammates before, right? So it's just allowing them to be these creative types. We don't want our athletes to be robots, man.
Hmm. Wow, and I feel like a lot of what, we do as coaches, and this is just my opinion, but like I would say like half of it is just helping players get out of their own way and sort of develop that, creativity and belief in themselves to really be themselves, whatever they're doing. Um,
That's right. So if you as the coach are not a creative person, then you're not going to build creative athletes, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And but could you go a little bit more deeper into how you can help or how you can use fitness to introduce grace, And I love that how what you said about giving your craziest combination, but like as a fitness coach, how would you approach that aspect of it? How could you use fitness exercises to do that, or how would you approach that?
As far as drawing out the grace, how often are you letting your athletes engage in structured and unstructured play? And ideally, more unstructured play. There's a reason why a lot of these soccer clubs nowadays have, you know, pickleball courts, right?
Hmm.
They've got basketball courts. They've got ping pong stations everywhere, right? It's just to encourage various movement strategies. It's repetition without repetition. That's Bernstein's work, 1967, where we're really just trying to expose them to as many different movement opportunities as they can. I mean, that flips on that we're playing with neuroplasticity, we're playing with neurogenesis, we're creating new connections in the brain. We're creating this opportunity for them to perceive differently than they ever did before, right? And
Hmm.
that's why almost always, not 100% of the time, those who become the best in their sport later, when it really matters, played a lot of sports, are 3 and 4 sport athletes until at least 15, 16 years old.
Hmm.
And probably, what the athletic skills model, which is actually out of the Netherlands, the authors of that text,
Interesting.
they look at sport like gymnastics and parkour as they call them donor sports. So you think about it as something that can create like this robust movement strategies for people. If I'm playing like my soccer players, right? One of the best sports for them to play and still be safe is like volleyball. It's like a
Hmm.
reactionary power based game. They're not having to like run the length of the field, right? Like some people would say, well, they could play ultimate frisbee because of the weaving in and out, or basketball. Yes, those are similar, but sometimes a good idea to get them completely redirected into another way of doing things. You know,
Hmm.
volleyball is a great sport to kind of get them completely out of being a soccer player and into just full on cut power, cut grace, that kind of thing.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah, and that reminds me a little bit of a concept that a mentor of mine taught me called variability. So like
Yes.
everything that would, the main thing emphasized in practices is just getting kids to hit the ball in a multitude of different ways. So they just get
Yes.
a lot of different looks at the ball, and I've seen incredible results with that.
Yeah, take it to physical education. You want kids to get better at throwing the traditional American way. We're here, we set, arm goes back, and we teach like everything. Or you put them on an obstacle course with like 8 different targets, and they have to change the arm angle, and they're usually on the move, and they're in that kind of rhythm, and they're not thinking so much. And they're more accurate than they'd ever be just throwing to a partner across from them, right?
Yes, exactly. Wow.
Yeah, you can observe that like all the time. My nephew, even, I would create obstacle courses for him, trying to get him to throw a baseball back and forth. He hated it. He couldn't throw. Created obstacle courses for him to have many opportunities to throw the ball in different ways. This kid just nailing the target from different arm angles, all this stuff. And again, I kind of referred to Bobby Stroop with Patrick Mahomes. What is Mahomes famous for? Arm slot everywhere. He'll even use his offhand, right? His
Hmm.
left hand. He'll throw in ways where you can't even imagine. And
Hmm.
before we hopped on this, you asked me about some things, through messages like these voice texts. I remember seeing CJ Stroud last year. They had a basketball out there. They had a baseball bat for him. He was throwing a baseball. I think he had a tennis racket, but he was like playing different sports in his warm up for football. And he had one of the best rookie seasons of any quarterback ever.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Yeah, wow. I see, and I can definitely see some interlap between fitness and tennis and also the variability aspect of it. And it's great to see how a lot of other athletes have trained using different methods, just by getting their body to move in different ways. And this is just the last thing that we're gonna touch on. If you could leave our listeners with one key takeaway or actionable step to improve their athletic performance, specifically for tennis players, what would it be?
Man, I think it's important, so important to be. I would say my modus operandi in life is to help you become all of you, and to dive into various practices in your life. And they may not always have this direct correlation to your sport, but it's that ability to be creative and laterally think. You know, everything in life is training. Every single thing we do can be a lesson. Every contact we have with a new person has the potential to change us. Every new book, every new sport, every new movement. So to be in that creative journey, right? That's the beautiful part of living, you know. There isn't going to be this like one key physiological thing that's going to take you to the next level. It's going to be an embodied exploration every single day you wake up, and to just
Hmm.
find out what's possible in this world, man.
Hmm.
There's no movement mastery. There's no mastery of life. What a beautiful thing to acknowledge.
Hmm. Wow, yeah. Well, that's a really, really powerful answer. And I think, as we spoke a little bit before, I think just talking to you has made me realize that, being a coach isn't putting a player into a box. And a lot of things is about exploring and being creative. And that's really the process of learning, is to,
Yeah.
explore and learn naturally. And I think that's sort of the test that athletes, but coaches and all people are trying to go through and master throughout their lives.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is actually a great stopping point. I really appreciate this call, and I really learned a lot, and I hope this talk can be a very insightful, informative knowledge for everybody out there to learn. This has been Bryson LaFleur with the Tennis Journal podcast with Hayden Mitchell. Hope this was an informative talk, and as always, great luck out there in the tennis court. Thanks.